I said goodbye to all of that, and I went to Alaska as a mission president. I received my mission call, which came as a shock to me where I was called to go. I knew I'd probably go to either Washington, D.C. or London because I owned a home in England at the time. Well, I didn't get either one. I got a place that I'd never entered into my mind, not one time, and that was the Anchorage, Alaskan mission. Alaska. I knew nothing about Alaska. Well, just before I got that call, I gave the last speech before going on my mission. That was in Salt Lake City. Following that speech, I got a call from President Ezra Taft Benson asking me to come immediately to his office. He and his wife had taken the liberty to go and hear me speak, and they were on the front row, and it was a complete sellout. There were in excess of over 24,000 people at the Salt Palace in Salt Lake City. So he said this to me: "That was the best speech I've ever heard in my life, outside of the pale of the tabernacle. I want to challenge you to figure out how to get that speech in every home in America, because it belongs in every home in America." I must confess now, I have failed in that regard. I haven't even gotten, to my knowledge, in hardly any homes, let alone every home. I don't know how to do that. Now, with the internet, I believe that could be done. And about 4 or 5 months ago, I got a call from Pat Gray. Now, I've already introduced Pat Gray to you. Without Pat Gray, there would never have been a speech in the first place. And Pat Gray said, "Doug, I listened to your speech last night, me and my wife, and tears came to my eyes. Because I've heard all the speeches over and over again. But every time that I heard yours, I liked it even more. And I just fell in love with your speech. Doug, what I want to do, I'm more or less semi-retired. Now, Pat Gray was so influential in the state of Missouri. If you wanted to become the governor, you'd see Pat Gray would tell you how to make it, and he'd take control. That's what he did for a living. And he was very, very successful, immensely so. But we remained great close friends, and we talked often on the phone. Well, Pat Gray says, "What I want to do is to get together with you, Doug. So I want to figure out how to get this speech in every home in America." That hit me so hard. I said, "Pat, I can't tell you what this means to me." And I told him about President Benson and his charge to me to get it in every home in America. He said, "Well, I think I can figure out how to do that. Plus, I want to just, with all of the things, Facebook and everything that's out there." He said, "Doug, this is my business. I know all about this stuff." And he said, "I got a few more things to do, and I'm going to figure out a business plan how we can do this, and I'll get together with you." Well, what happened was, before he could finish the business plan, Pat Gray died of a heart attack. So I'm left, I know there's no one else like him. I don't know what to do in this regard, but broke my heart. I liked him so much, respected him. Well, back to President Benson. About a week later, or maybe even sooner, I can't remember exactly the sequence, he'd called me and asked me if I'd meet him in his office on a Saturday. So I go up there on a Saturday. He's dressed in kind of like I am, a Harris tweed, but he had a colored shirt, had a tie. He was casually attired but well dressed. And he said, I have a problem, and I have tried to solve this problem on my own but failed. And I believe you can help me. And then he told the story of his father-in-law. And his father-in-law's name was Emerson, who was a jeweler. And the father-in-law had seen a tract in Europe on the side of the road on the Mormon church. He read it, knew it was true. He phoned London. He got the address. He wanted to get baptized. He was in Europe. They had no missionaries at the time. But eventually made his way to London. They baptized him, and he decided to come west. Now, he was a very successful jeweler, and he was also the jeweler for the king of Russia at the time. And I believe he lived in Denmark, Mr. Emerson. Well, he tells me that he came west. He sired President Benson's wife when he was 76 years of age. Remember President Benson telling me this. He says, boy, he was quite a man. And then he said he built a jewelry store right on State Street and down about halfway in the block. He was so particular, he wanted the slate roof to be imported from the East. It was made out of stone, slate. It had to be perfect. And he says, the church has now entered into a deal where all the buildings in that block are going to be torn down, particularly those that face State Street, which means that the Emerson jewelry store building will be torn down. I believe it's wrong, but we have a deal with the contractor, and they're going to build the mall and everything in that entire block. But I'm trying to save that Emerson building, that pioneer building. And I've gone to the contractor and talked to him, and he's rejected me because he now has control of that block, not us, on the church side. And I don't know what to do. And it came to me, if it can be saved, it's up to you. And said, would you try and put this deal together and save this building before you leave to go to Alaska? I said, well, if I remember correctly, it was I had about 2 weeks. I said, I think I can, maybe if it can be done, I can't guarantee this, President Benson, but I already have an idea how to do it. But you'll have to call the existing mission president, President Howard Barbin, and tell him that I'm going to be 2 weeks late so that I have a full month to pull this off. Okay. So immediately I went to the contractor. And he laughed at me, actually mocked me. President Benson is unrealistic. We can't. How you can't just build a mall around a building? I mean, the building's got to go. There's no way that we can save that building. It just is not economically feasible. And he just won't give up on this. And I've been approached by him several times, and I'm getting sick of it. And I said, well, I only ask one thing from you. Can you give me the name and give me the permission to talk to your architect? He said yes. So I got the name. I go to the architect. And I said, all I want is a copy of your plans. Would you give me a copy of your plans? Yep. So he gave me what's called a blue line copy of the plans. Then I went to another architect whom I had met when I went to the Art Center in Los Angeles, and he was going to the UCLA Architecture School, graduated with honors, by the way, and we met at the same church, and it was great. And so I showed him the plans, and I said, my idea is this, that we take this building, it goes, but the front of the building stays. And we move that front of that building in front of the Key Bank building that's going in. And so we save basically the front of the building and the doors so that we get that whole feeling of the building itself. We put a plaque on there explaining about the Amazon building. So what we do is we compromise. Can you draw it for me? How it will look and how it can be done with the existing building. And he did that. So then I went to the mayor, and I went to the governor, and I went to the head of the Utah Historical Society. Then I got a hold of the local newspapers, and I had about 6 or 7 of them there, and that all agreed with me that that was a smart way, and we got to save that building, and you have figured out how to do it, Doug. Now, then I went to President Benson, and I said to him, President Benson, we're going to hold a meeting in your office. Now, I'll do the talking. I'll introduce them. I'll set the stage. Then I'll turn the time over to you. And you express to them how grateful you are that they're in your office, how grateful you are to them for even considering to save the building on some basis. And then you express unto them with great thanksgiving. And just let your words come. You do it in your own way. You forgot more about how to do this than I'll ever know. He agreed to that attack. So the meeting was set. This took quite a while to see all these people and to give all those presentations and get them on board. So we all ended up in President Benson's office. And I stood up, introduced each one to President Benson. I told that we're here on a common basis. We're all in agreed. And there sat the contractor right in front of me. And he was just growling away. But anyway, there he was. It was one against a multitude, basically, in that office. And so in that process of the introducing, what I did was I wanted to get their opinion. So when I got to the mayor, Corradini, for example, and asked, well, how do you feel about this? She bore her testimony, all for what we had done. Each one came across in total affirmation to what we were all trying to do. Then I turned the time over for the clincher. The clincher, the closer of the deal, is President Benson himself. And this grand old man. Yeah, I can see him now. And he was so grateful. I mean, it was so obvious that he was expressing such gratitude that they were there. They wanted to do the very thing that he dreamed of doing, to save that building. And then when it was done, and he was unequaled, then I invited the contractor to say a few words. And he concurred. And it was saved. Then we came to the plaque. I said, the plaque will be written by President Benson's family and himself. I'll have nothing to do with the plaque. And it was written. Now, years later, they tore all that down. It's gone. And they rebuilt. Incredible amount of money. Upwards to over $2 billion. The church said $2 billion, I think is more than that. Because they didn't factor in the value of the land. If you factored in the value of the land, it would be infinitely more than $2 billion. You'd have had 2 complete blocks, 20 acres in other words. So the building's gone. So I got a hold of the architect that was in charge of that building complex. And it happened to be the same architect that President Hinckley used with the conference center. And later on, I'll tell the story about how I interfaced with this same architect in Alaska with the buildings that we build up there. I'll take care of this, Doug. So this building has been moved over. Now, it's kind of a compromise with sort of a representation so that it would last forever. And they've got new bricks and a few things like that. But the building is there. As you walk out of the church office, as you go into the temple, on the south side in the middle of the block, you walk out and you cross that street, you'd walk into what was old Richard Street. Now that's changed. But you go down that street, it's all new now, down a few buildings, and there on your left is the representation of that Pioneer building, the Amundsen building, and the plaque, original plaque, is there. And so somehow we have survived that. And I agree. If you lose track of the old, you can never appreciate the new because there's no linkage. And that's why history becomes so valuable. If you don't study history accurately, you can never appreciate current events because there's no relationship. It stands all by itself. You got to have the connection from the past to the present, and hopefully you can extrapolate somewhat into the future by taking all three in sequence. And so I think with that, and President Benson, the last thing he said to me before I left to go to Alaska was, Doug, you are my true friend. Coming from that man. And I'm going to close with that.